Raw, that main event, and all of the players and elements involved really showed me why this could be a top tier storyline for 2025. There's a reason why this could be the best story, or at least my favorite story in WWE this year. Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker. The potential for new members added to this faction and not rushing it. This to me feels like from WWE's creative, and it's very early on, and they could totally mess this thing up. But I feel like this has the potential to be Judgment Day, the Bloodline-esque story, in terms of them putting a lot of investment and time into it. They're not the same story arcs, but what I mean is it's WWE and Triple H's main focal point across both shows. John Cena, Cody Rhodes, yes, Cena specifically, that seems to be the whole story, the biggest one when it comes to SmackDown, despite him being on Raw a lot. But on Raw, I think that is the anchor program, just like the Bloodline was for so long, just like Judgment Day was for so very long. What I'm excited about is to see how someone like Braun Breaker develops. Seeing him interact with Paul Heyman and Seth backstage on Raw this past week, where he's asking questions of why Seth is getting the title match, and Paul Heyman explaining it and discussing it with him and building it up. It was really well done. The other piece that I really enjoyed was Paul Heyman's entire speech and promo at the beginning of Raw with Jey in the ring. It caught me off guard having Jey in the ring and then Paul Heyman interrupt him, of all people, because I thought, oh man, they are already going to cross over this storyline. Like, we're gonna see Seth and this new group going after the world title. I thought that they would maybe hold back for a little while and focus primarily on Punk Roman. I thought Paul Heyman's performance and everything he broke down on Raw was top notch, like promo of the year kind of deal. In terms of captivating me and making me interested in the group, the match with Jey and Seth that we were gonna get, and all of the pieces that are interconnected. Part of me, I don't know about you, but part of me felt like they were gonna do the title change on Raw. That's how I was convinced by Paul Heyman, because I felt like it was almost rushed in a way, having Paul go out there and throw all of the storyline pieces out on the table in front of Jey about Roman Reigns, the relationship, CM Punk being his best friend, decisions done at WrestleMania, laying it all out, and the family history and the bloodline, all of it together. It really made me feel like they're gonna maybe hot potato the title and put it on Seth right away. The fact that Paul Heyman could kind of anchor this group, I think adds so much more to it, and across different storylines with different superstars. What they can pull from when it comes to Jey Uso and Seth Rollins and Paul Heyman, that relationship. Even Braun Breaker and Jey Uso for all of the matches they had around the IC title. The obvious ones of CM Punk and Paul Heyman and Seth. And then the other half of that, which is Sami Zayn and his dynamic with Jey, with Seth, with Paul Heyman because of the bloodline. And all of this kind of stemming from the bloodline itself originally, as Paul Heyman even brought that up in his promo. This is why I think it all goes back to the bloodline originally, and why, not that WWE does everything so great and it's all well done and perfect, by no means is it. There's a ton of gaps left and right that we can all find. But one of the good things and positive things is that they are able and willing to pull from the history to show that how much depth it has, to anchor it when they do tell these new stories, where maybe if it was a couple of years ago, it wouldn't make as much sense, or they wouldn't talk about the history as much. They would just say, these are all the new bad guys and they want the belt and that's the story. And then it peters out after 3 months, there's a turn and then it all goes down. This has me excited because I think we can get a very long road with it. Now, looking at the main event match, where we had Jey Uso and Seth for the world title. WWE, do more of that. I don't need it every single week where I have a title match, world title match on the show, but man, does it help bring excitement, intrigue, and the question marks of how will it end? Because sure, for a lot of people, they'd say, Jey is not losing the title on Raw. That's ridiculous. He just got it at WrestleMania. Also, what about Logan Paul, which we'll talk about too? Too many factors involved for Jey to drop the belt that quickly. But that's where it kind of got really interesting for me watching this, because of how it was built throughout the night. And then that's the stuff that I like, is that you have a through line throughout the show that gets you more engaged and really just has me wondering how will it end. So I like that we had Sami Zayn come out towards the end of the match. He's all rib taped up and you got Braun Breaker doing the massive spear on Sami Zayn, which to me can set up a match, a very obvious one, of Braun versus Sami if they want to do that. The other match that I think people will probably expect to see is the rematch between Seth and Sami and how they put that together. But I think you also have interesting factors in there with Sami Zayn, where maybe in a few months he does go up against Jey Uso for the world title. I don't see Jey in a long program with Logan Paul. He could go to Sami and then circle it in with Seth. The cool thing with the world title and Jey having it is all of the other players surrounding it, and that's where it gets really exciting for me. And where you contrast that with Cena's title and his whole story, it's very singular, and there's probably one person that makes sense with that belt, and that's Cody. I like the world title right now because it's interesting with so many dynamic superstars, even Braun Breaker getting title shots against Jey Uso. And then how does that conflict with Seth Rollins and his feelings towards it? They can always unpack this stuff down the road. Now, Sami got knocked out on Raw. This is where it felt at the very end there with CM Punk. So CM Punk, spoiler, CM Punk came out at the end, towards the end of the very end of the match. This is where it felt like an Attitude Era Raw for me. Why? Because I got a title match on Raw that was building and building and building with near falls, and the intensity and the tension was building up. And then you started getting the interference. You got Sami Zayn involved, and then it was equalized with Braun. And then you feel like, okay, is there a shot? It really felt like Seth was going to win, and Jey is getting out of it. And then CM Punk comes out with the steel chair, felt very much like Austin coming out, and I was wondering how this thing would end. But it messed up. Would Jey retain? It all breaks down into, I believe, like a no contest, right? Or DQ finish. I didn't hear the bell go. But Punk comes down, takes out Braun Breaker, and all the baby faces are left standing tall at the end of the night. I thought it was an awesome way to end Raw. And now there's more intrigue of, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna do a tag team match? Are you gonna have Jey and Punk versus Braun and Seth? What about Sami? Is Seth's team going to recruit and bring in somebody else? This is the thing that is good and more captivating week over week from a story perspective, is that there are different lanes and avenues that they can take with this and with every character. I honestly thought that they would take Punk out of the story for like till Money in the Bank. Like, I didn't know when he would come back because I thought they would just keep the beatdown thing going. Roman, then, who knows? Roman could show up in 2 weeks. Roman might not come back till SummerSlam again. We don't know. But that level of intrigue is now there. And Seth having the world title, while it might not be the most exciting thing for a lot of people, I think the story makes sense for it. And it's Seth as a heel, Seth as a bad guy, a justified bad guy with the belt, which is different than what he was doing with the title before. When Seth won the world title and he was the inaugural champion, it was very much workhorse champion. Good guy Seth Rollins, workhorse champion, everyone woes with him, does his theme, and he puts on good matches every single month and every single week, defending the belt regularly. It was a good thing. But having Seth as the heel and eventually maybe taking the belt off Jey, it leaves a lot more intrigue for me of what direction they could take. And not that Jey is a bad champion. I think him beating Gunther was the right decision. They needed to do that Mania. I just almost thought that they would drop that belt on Raw, and they didn't. And I think Jey will hold on to it for a few more months. He's wildly popular. The crowd still yeets like crazy. Top merch seller. Keep the belt on Jey until it doesn't make sense anymore. And then Jey climbing back up is always a really good story to do too. But the other interesting piece from Raw that leads me to believe that this could be even better, or getting better, and I think they are going to slow burn this whole story, hopefully. I found it very interesting that all of a sudden, Austin Theory got a match on Raw. He went up against Sheamus one-on-one. This was supposed to apparently be Grayson Waller versus Sheamus, or mystery opponent. And the storyline was that Grayson Waller bailed out of it and gave it to Theory. I like that Theory was wearing the black trunks. I thought that it was very interesting that Theory was all of a sudden being showcased in a long, really good standout match. He hasn't been on Raw that much. Him and Grayson Waller don't get featured all that often. And with this new faction, there's been more and more rumblings of Theory joining that group. I just found it maybe it means nothing. Maybe it is just simply nothing and more of just get Sheamus back on TV and has nothing to do with Austin Theory, but it wasn't a squash. And we know what happened the last time Theory was on TV. And it seemed to be reported that due to the time constraints, they cut his Jey Uso match really short, so it ended up being a squash match, which people really did not like. I wonder if this is a way, and will we see Theory get featured on TV every single week? Because the little storyline, that little nugget they have in there between Theory and Grayson Waller is, if you've watched my channel at all, maybe you haven't, but hi, my name is Matt. We did talk about how Waller and Theory teased the breakup like a year ago, and it never happened. This could be the starting of them breaking up, the seed. Why did Grayson Waller give up his match? He was afraid of Sheamus, and he didn't tell Theory who his opponent was going to beat. I think that's a really good piece of storytelling because it's going to hopefully layer into them breaking up, where Theory keeps getting screwed on TV every week by Grayson Waller. Waller keeps ducking and keeps bailing out of stuff, or they get into tag team matches and Waller makes a mistake or doesn't get the tag or screws up the ending. Like, things are going to start falling apart, I think, for these two, and that will lead to Theory getting more frustrated, and he might get a little bit more cheered from the fans, and he can get more cheered over Waller, because I think between the two of them, Theory would end up being kind of the babyface, the better guy between the two of them. You have Theory break, and then maybe give it a little bit of time, Theory could end up showing up with Seth and Braun to round out that group. Now, this idea of Matt's here could happen sooner rather than later. I thought it was interesting that at the end of Raw, you had Punk and Sammy and Jey standing tall. Could that be a future 6-man match like we talked about earlier, a tag team match? It's very possible. But what direction do you go in? Can't be 3-on-3 because we don't have the third man, brother. So what do? You have Night of Champions, and you have Money in the Bank coming up, and Saturday night's main event. But I think a tag team or a 6-man tag is too big for Saturday night's main event. Night of Champions, the time I'm recording this is before Backlash, and Jey Uso and Logan Paul were not confirmed for Backlash. However, at the end of Raw, as it went off Netflix, there was a social media post. WWE planned out this other segment where the match, everything ended. Jey was going around ringside with the fans, and he got punched by Logan Paul, and Logan Paul ran away. So they did that off TV to keep that story going. I did like, however, that Logan Paul was not involved in Raw at all. And Paul Heyman and Jey talked about it in their promo. They did mention Logan Paul, like they're going to talk tonight or see him tonight or something. Thought that they were going to really push that promo, that segment between Paul and Jey for Backlash. We didn't get that, which makes me think maybe that we're going to get Logan Paul and Jey at Night of Champions. That could be a good match, singles match, one-on-one for Jey to get a win over Logan Paul, so he can get rid of that whole situation and that storyline, because I think the bigger and better story arc is Jey mixing it up with Heyman again, but now with Seth and Braun, which could then get us to Money in the Bank, and they could play this over several weeks. You could do tag matches or build it up when it's Punk and Sammy, which would be totally different and new, against Seth and Braun. They could do that at Saturday night's main event or Night of Champions or something like that. But once we get to Money in the Bank, unless Punk and others are going to be in Money in the Bank, like Seth, Sammy, maybe those guys, Braun, they'll all be in it. You never know, and that could really shake up Money in the Bank itself. But if they're not in it, I could see a 6-man tag. But before that, we'd have to have the reveal of the third man, which could be Austin Theory. I'm still thinking here, though, that Jey Uso's losing that belt by SummerSlam, and he's probably going to lose it to Seth, but he can still stay in title contention, fight Braun, fight Seth, conflict with Sammy, conflict with Punk. There's a lot to do, and then there's lingering of Roman Reigns out there. I'm not trying to fantasy book of like, here's the entire year and how WWE should do it, but Raw, that main event, and all of the players and elements involved really showed me why this could be a top tier storyline for 2025.